Hi, my name is Alyssa West, and I did my research essay on education inequality in the United States. Um, Education is a really complex topic, so I decided to specifically talk about education reform and past, present, and potentially future uh, methods that were created to fix the achievement gap and include more schools in proactive learning environments. So, from Monroe Blum, due to the complexity of the problem, no one sector, whether government, universities, business, or nonprofit, can provide solutions but need to work in partnership. And I really like that quote because it explains that not only is this reform not going to come from one single person or entity, but it needs to be something that happens with a lot of different steps. We have to fix education through many different means, and it won't come with one single solution. Education is evolving, and over time, it's becoming a harder and harder solution to find. Um, my interest in this topic came from my experience at Operation Breakthrough. Operation Breakthrough was originally created to provide childcare in Kansas City. It was created in the 70s, and from Sister Berta, one of the founders, she said in an interview, "Middle and upper class people, the wife stayed home and the husband worked. Well, a lot of our single moms needed childcare, and it wasn't a regulated industry then at all." And I like this because it points out that um, Operation Breakthrough began because that's what was necessary then. That was just childcare was important at the time. And they've evolved with the community so much because they're around so much later. And I think that that's really cool because they have given so many more services after, and they have to, they're helping with poverty that they didn't have back then. And I think that that's cool that they're evolving with the community, and that makes them such an important part of the community. And so my experience with them was outside tutoring. And outside tutoring programs are usually referred to as supplementary education services. And Ashby explains that those kinds of services were mandated under the No Child Left Behind Act. They're very good services when they're implemented correctly. Ashby explains that to promote improved student academic achievement, providers took steps to gather information on district curriculum and student needs from teachers and parents. And so that quote explains that these programs work best when they're implemented with the help of schools to let the tutors understand what the kids are doing in school, understand what the kind of levels they should be performing at with different academic subjects. And she highlights a few problems though that are the parents that don't know that they're eligible, their students, their kids could be eligible for these programs because the kids aren't performing well and the schools aren't succeeding as much as they should with these kids. And also the kids could have extracurricular activities which would interfere with their ability to go to these services. So they try to fix a lot of these problems. The Ashby explains how they should be working with schools, and it's really good when schools let those services use their space so the kids don't have to travel after school or anything, and that makes it a lot easier. Also with the No Child Left Behind Act, standardized testing was a really big focal point to making students have to have their kids performing at a certain level. And The problem with standardized testing, I think most people are aware at this point, is that teachers are forced to teach to take the test. And so instead of the kids learning actual material or learning what like the standard curriculum for their area is, they're learning like information like from rote memorization, or they use these different like testing techniques that aren't actually like educational. It's not helping them, and it's not teaching them really very much. So the students that do end up struggling the most don't really have a lot they can do, because the teachers cannot like make the learning more customizable and like fit the environment to the student's specific needs. So that makes it really hard, especially for like low-income schooling districts, because they can't afford very much extra outside services or anything, because standardized testing itself is very expensive as well. So Scogan explains all of that. And Berliner goes on to explain that students that like rush and cram for the test, they're not really good like indicative representation for how well their teachers are, because the teachers, can only do so much when they're forced in these environments to like have to teach to take the test, and they can't really do very much about that. So it's another issue, because the No Child Left Behind Act also like holds the teachers accountable for how well their students are doing, and that's not fair, because it's not a good indication of how smart the kids are or how good of a teacher the teacher is. So the other issue with teachers is that David Berliner explains, the Federal No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 mandated that a highly qualified teacher be in all our nation's classrooms by academic year 2005 to 2006. So that was actually required, and Berliner explains, because high quality teacher, it has to be defined by each state. And the other issues with that are, because it's got, good intention, is that you would want like high quality teachers for every school in every classroom, but they said that in his state specifically, he explained how they have a shortage of teachers. So having like a really like rigorous test to rule out a bunch of teachers isn't actually good, because they need as many teachers in those positions as possible, and turning away people that will willingly do it is kind of not fun. And then also the schools that are struggling the most with it, they said, like Fryer on page 18 of his book says, one potential explanation of such large racial achievement gaps, even after accounting for differences in the schools that racial minorities attend, is the possibility that they are assigned inferior teachers within schools. So the teaching is a really big problem, but they also can't like afford the good teachers, like, if that makes sense. Really educated teachers with higher degrees are going to accept jobs that can pay more, and that kind of puts the schools with lower income levels at a disadvantage to having better teachers. And presently we have the Every Student Succeeds Act, and it's a more personalized education. Dynarski explains, the Every Student Succeeds Act, the new reauthorization of the federal program designed to support the education of disadvantaged students, requires that states and districts use evidence-based interventions to support school improvement. Researchers have studied the effectiveness of education programs for decades, and that effort is now producing substantial gains in knowledge of what works and what doesn't. So, to explain, he has the Every Student Succeeds Act has more focus on research. And there's been a lot of research on this, thankfully, that we need an individualized approach at education. So the first implementation is just to use methods that we know work in schools for like teaching and curriculum. And then also their second like step to this is that once they see the schools that are performing the worst under the Every Student Succeeds Act, they're going to have like teams go in basically to those schools and communities to kind of understand why they're not performing well still, and implement even more like helpful methods to fix that issue. So I think that that's really cool, because that's basically what all of this research has led up to us for us to understand, is that there needs to be a more individualized approach to education. And so the future is pretty unclear at this point. Betsy DeVos is the new Secretary of Education, and a lot of what she's said so far has been about the voucher programs. And so from Turner, he says, often called scholarships, vouchers are most often reserved for low-income students, children with disabilities, or for families zoned to a failing public school. And they allow families to choose which school they want to send their kids to with money from the state. This kind of, this concept, it means that like the money that would be going to the public school for the student is taken from the public school and given to like a private school of their choice or whatever. And the issue with it is that there is not a ton of research on it actually, but Turner said that like in like the early 2000s or whatever, like they had little to no like improvement in the kids' scores that did this like in urban areas, and those are with really big populations. But in rural areas, they actually have really bad effects, because the schools need all of the money from those students, and the more students that don't go, the less money they get, so they can't even stay open under these things. But a lot more research has to be done, and it's not very clear whether or not this is effective. But we do know that we need to learn from flaws in past laws and acts for education, and the most important thing we can do is recognize the problems that are affecting children the most. Programs that directly target helping children in need are improving education greatly, and more can be done in those communities, specifically low-income communities that are disadvantaged the most by not having the best teachers and enough resources. So hopefully they do something about that. Thank you very much.